Hey friends, welcome to Tuesday Night Vespers. My name is Adam Hamilton. I'm the senior pastor at Church of the Resurrection. We're glad to have you join us tonight. And Church of the Resurrection, cor.org if you want to find out more information about our church. Tonight I have a special guest. So we have a chance to visit with this evening Coach Donnie Campbell. And Coach Donnie Campbell coached at a variety of high schools in the Kansas City area. He coached at Shawnee Mission West High School, a particular student named Jason Sudeikis. And it was Jason Sudeikis who created the character of Ted Lasso, 20 Emmy nominations, 7 Emmy Awards just in the last couple of weeks. And the character of Ted Lasso was in part inspired by his high school basketball coach at Shawnee Mission West. So anyway, this is going to be a lot of fun. I think you're going to really enjoy this interview, and I'm excited to have Coach Donnie Campbell with me. He's a coach and a math teacher at Lee Summit North High School. He coaches freshman basketball there now, retired, and then came back into coaching again just to be able to help out. And a really remarkable guy, and I know you're going to really be blessed by this. So Coach Campbell, Great to be with you today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to ask you a few questions. First of all, you have now become quite famous, way more famous than you probably ever anticipated. Although you had been drafted, or at least you got signed on by the Houston Oilers at one point to play quarterback for them. Is that right?
Well, I signed as a free agent with the Houston Oilers out of Kansas State, and I probably had the shortest pro career of any quarterback in the history of the NFL. I did signed a contract with them as a free agent and went into camp, and I thought I had a pretty good camp, but at that time they were only keeping 2 quarterbacks, and so I was the odd man out. I did get to be around Warren Moon, who was a tremendous quarterback, and just to be around him the few days, he's a really good guy.
That's awesome. So where did you grow up? Where was home for you?
Little bitty town called Lyons, Kansas, like 30 miles northwest of Hutchinson, 90 minutes northwest of Wichita. About 3,500 people, small town, great place to be raised. I call it home.
Yeah, and kind of salt of the earth people out there, right?
Oh, the values there are unbelievable.
Yeah.
Hard work, honesty, integrity.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, so when people watch Ted Lasso, of course the show is, 20 Emmy nominations. It won 7 Emmy Awards. But I think what draws people to Ted Lasso is he's kind of that salt of the earth, just a good guy. He sort of speaks like a guy from, the Midwest or Central Kansas somewhere. And yet his inspiration was in part you. So tell me, when you've watched the show, so do you see yourself in Ted Lasso? Or if you don't, do your kids see you in Ted Lasso?
Well, it's hard sometimes to see yourself in somebody because you really don't really know how you act. But I do see that when you coach, you're trying to teach through what you do, games or practices. There's life lessons involved in them, and there's always something positive that you can take out of it. So I do see that in what Jason does. I also see in how positive he is. He takes everything and makes it into a positive. I've always tried to be that way. We used to start practice at Shawnee Mission West. I coached Jason at Shawney Mission West.
Yep. And not in football, but in basketball.
And in basketball, yes. I was the head basketball coach, and I was a young coach then. And I would always come out. I'm a big John Wooden fan. And bring out, and always had some quote or something to start practice, like make today your masterpiece, or what defines success is, doing your best, trying to be the best you can be. And he was hearing that back then, but he was actually listening because he's doing the same thing with that show.
Yeah, and it's interesting because today, coaches across the country are watching Ted Lasso to get tips on how to be better coaches. Isn't that interesting?
It is, and I'll be honest with you, I'm learning more as a teacher and coach from the show than he learned from me. I mean, I feel like it's pay you forward a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I mean, there's great lessons for all of us in there, and as a teacher, coach, as a parent, as a minister, whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So tell us a little bit more about your coaching history. Where have you pursued your career in coaching?
My first head coaching, I was an assistant. I started out in 1986 at Blue Valley North, opened that building up. I was an assistant for 3 years.
Okay.
Then from there I went to Gardner Edgerton High School, and I was a head coach there for 3 years. Then I went to Shawnee Mission West for 9 years, and that's where I coached Jason Sudeikis.
Yep.
And then from there I went to Blue Valley West High School, and I was there for 16 years.
Wow.
And then I retired in Kansas, and then I came here, and I didn't coach the first year And then our head coach here, Mike Hilbert, was gracious enough. We talked about it, and I'm now the freshman coach, and I'm loving it.
That's awesome. So you have quite a long career, and it's not just in coaching, but you're also a teacher. What do you teach?
Teach math. I've taught math now. This will be 36 years.
All right. So tell me why. What is it? Do you have a sense of calling to be a teacher and a coach? What is it that's kept you doing this all these years?
Well, it's the teachers that I had growing up and the coaches. You know, they made such a profound impact on my life. You know, I think of all the teachers and coaches, they all spoke greatness into me. And they all said, you know, you could be something special, you know, with work. And I just feel so blessed and so lucky to have the people in my life growing up that would put their arm around me when I needed it, gave me a little kick in the seat when I needed it. But I knew every time they loved me and cared for me and wanted the best for me.
That's awesome. And that really does point, I mean, all of us can do that, right? You don't have to be a professional coach. All of us can be pouring into people and investing in them, right?
I agree. And I think that it's amazing your impact on what you say to people just by being nice.
Yeah.
And caring, you know, and I think that's so important in the day and age we live in now.
And that really is the theme of Ted Lasso too, right? I mean, here's a guy who is just a nice guy. He doesn't know anything about European soccer, but he knows about people and caring for people. Is that how you read the show too?
Oh, it's an endearing show. You know, you love it. I totally agree with you. I think that you know, there's certain coaches that it doesn't matter. They can take your team and beat their team and take their team and beat your team. And it's not that they're great with the X and O's, but they know how to work with the Johnnies and the Joes. And they know how to motivate each player by words, by actions. You know, there's just special coaches out there, and he's one of them.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, clearly you're one of them because you've had a chance to shape and help Jason see this.
Right.
You know, the fact that he remembered all these years later, and you realize, you know, the impact on his life that you had, that's got to be rewarding for you.
It's very rewarding. It's very humbling. You know, when you see it on TV and you see mentioned your name, and you know, you think of all the players I've coached, and lucky enough to coach Jason, but. You know, the biggest thing, you know, I had a principal tell me this one time after we won a state championship. He said, Donnie, I'm really proud of you, your staff, your team. But you know, the thing that I really like the most about you is you know what's the most important thing is what they end up being 5, 10, 15 years from now. Yeah. That's what means the most to me.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So you won a state championship, but what that principal was pointing to is something that's deeply ingrained in you, that your ultimate goal isn't so much about wins and losses. Tell us a little more about that.
Well, we've always tried, at least I have, in our program, it's all about developing men of character. And, you know, we're trying to make everybody better people, you know, and to me, you know, being a father, being a coach, you know, when it's all said and done, you know, all of us want to be winners. But to me, what do we define as a winner? And to me, at the end of my life, I hope that they said that he was a good person. And I think that's what we want for all our players, for our students, for our own kids. Yep. That's my opinion.
I think so too. I think every week when I go in to preach, what I'm thinking about is in part, obviously I want to help people understand the scriptures. I want to let them hear God's voice. But I also want people to leave wanting to be more authentically human, wanting to be their best selves, wanting to be better and more loving and caring when they left than when they came in. And it sounds like that's really what you were aiming to do as well.
I always tell players this, you know, you don't have to win a championship to be a champion. You know, I think you're constantly trying to teach kids first how to be a champion before you can be a champion. And I think that's, you know, the way you treat people, your integrity, how hard you work. You know, those are all values that will carry over to whatever you do to be successful, at least to be the best you can be.
Yep. You said something the other day when we talked about the importance of being clear about, in essence, your why. Say a little bit more about that.
Well, I think no matter anything you do, you got to know why you do it. And when coaching and teaching, my thing has always been developing players or students to be the best people they can be, to have quality character. And I think that if you do that, everything else falls into place. I think it's like a tree. You know, you have to have great roots. Yep. You have to have a cornerstone, right? And if you have a strong foundation, then I think everything just falls in place. And I think you also need to know in what you're doing is you have to have some non-negotiables. Yeah. I said, these are the things that we are not going to deviate from, you know, discipline, being unselfish, playing hard. Those are all things that I always emphasize, and you don't have to be 6'10" to be, or run like a deer or jump like a frog to do those things. Those are things that you can control.
Yeah, I love this idea that, and we talk about this a lot in the church world too, being clear about your purpose helps you know what you do and what you don't do. Like, okay, I'm really clear, and so if I'm clear about why I'm doing this, then it helps me focus on how I'm going to do it. And that sounds like how you've coached.
You make every decision based on what your value system is, what your why is, if you will.
Yep. Let's talk about the hard things that you have to do as a leader. What's hard about being a coach or a leader?
Well, many times the decisions you make aren't very popular, and I've always said this, if you want to be a leader, don't sell ice cream.
By that you mean what?
Well, you're going to make some decisions sometimes that people aren't going to like.
Yeah.
And sometimes you make decisions, I had to make cuts every year.
Yeah.
And my wife says, Donnie, I never slept during tryouts because I knew I'd have to look a young man in the eye and say, hey, you're not going to make the team. And I did that every year. I might cut 50 kids. That's hard, because I care about those kids. And but you only have so many uniforms. So you're going to make decisions that are not going to be always popular, but you got to always, again, go back to your why, your decisions. You have to make decisions based on what's best for the whole, and sometimes that's not best for the one person.
Right. So, and both as a coach and as a teacher, I'm guessing you received your share of criticism over the years. What does that feel like, and how did you deal with that?
Well, I think, number one, when you're younger, you don't have the confidence to handle criticism, because you haven't done it for a long time, and you probably don't have your philosophy ingrained yet. You're still learning. I'm still learning now. But I think as you get older, you have a lot more confidence, and you understand that that the decisions you make, you've thought them through, you've analyzed them, you've done everything you could to make the right decision, and you just got to make it and live with it and know that some people aren't going to like it. It is what it is.
Yeah, I just think that's so important. When I was in my 20s and probably 20s and 30s, the criticism was much more painful. Today, it still hurts sometimes, but it's like, okay, that's all right. It's okay for you to feel differently. It's okay for you to, but this is why I made this decision, and it just doesn't eat at you quite as much when you and I are about the same age, and doesn't eat at you quite as much when you get older, does it?
Well, we still all want to be felt like people like us, and I think to be a leader sometimes, in fact, really, you've got to be able to understand being lonely, because being a leader can be a lonely job, and so you have to have self-confidence in yourself, and that comes from knowing what your why is, going back to that. This is what I believe in. For example, I believe in man-to-man defense, and I believe in motion offense. That because I think it's the hardest thing to do, but it's the best thing to do, because it teaches kids how to play. It teaches kids how to work together, which is my whole philosophy, so when we make evaluations on players, are they skilled? Are they athletic? Are they good teammates? There's so many things that come into it that you evaluate your players with. You pick why you pick them and why you don't pick them.
Yep. That's awesome. Well, and that gets back to, again, knowing your why and knowing your non-negotiables, right? And so that helps you in the end when you're clear about that. We talked on the phone the other day at Resurrection, we talked about your being clear about your MVP, your mission, your vision, and your plan. And when you're clear about that, then it helps everything else go better. You have greater clarity, greater impact when you're clear about those things. Okay, I want to ask you, so you are a man of faith. You grew up Lutheran. You're a practicing Catholic. How has your faith affected your coaching and your teaching?
Well, I think when you're more in tune with your faith, I think you act more Christ-like. You try to be more like Christ, and then you make more decisions based on. Sometimes when I was younger, I probably made some decisions on how I made them and how I acted that probably weren't the most Christian-like. Now I'm a lot more, I think things through a lot more, and I probably give kids now more grace than I did 25 years ago because of my faith. And I always try to think when I make a decision, what would Christ want me to do? Not all the time. I try to do that. I'm not perfect by any means, but I always think about that. And that, again, that goes back to your why. When you think of, and sometimes you don't know exactly what decision to make, and that's when you need to delve into the book, the Bible, and try to get some answers and pray for those answers. And, I've just always, with my faith, I think too, is sometimes the answer that you pray for you don't get. It's not what you really want, but it's what's best for you. You just don't see it at that time. And I think that's sometimes something that I don't always agree with, even though God has a plan for me, and it might not be the plan that I want, but He knows what's best.
Yeah, it's amazing how in God's providence things tend to work out in ways that you could not have imagined to begin with. I'm guessing that that's happened in your life, where you wouldn't have imagined in Lyons, Kansas exactly where you'd be, or that you'd have national media talking to you about your coaching philosophy or life.
I agree, and I just feel very, very blessed and lucky that I've had the opportunity to keep doing what I'm doing for 36 years, and I still love what I do. I'm still passionate about what I do.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've taught leadership too. What are several of the key leadership principles that you haven't already mentioned?
Well, I think you have to be honest. I think you can't have trust without honesty, and I think that's key in leadership. And I think you have to set the right example. I mean, you got to do what you say, but more importantly, you got to walk the walk. And I think also you need to be a great communicator every day about, to whoever you're coaching, this is what we're doing, and then why are we doing this? And there needs to be great communication. Lines need to be open. And I think thirdly is I've always believed that you're a servant. As a leader, you're there to help each person under your tutelage to be the best version of themselves. And sometimes in doing that, you might have to, like in the Ted Lasso show, each player has a different button to push. Does that make sense? And so people under your tutelage, you need to know them. You need to get to know them. And then that gives you a better avenue or a better idea on ways to help them. Because each person's different. Each player's different.
That's exactly right. You said something the other day about you may not be the best coach. I want you to say that quote because I thought it was really moving.
Well, I've always believed, I've interviewed how many times for jobs? 5 or 6, okay? And every job I interviewed for, I never felt like I was the best coach. I felt like I was the right coach. And I think every team you coach, every group you're working with, you have to be a different coach for that group. So I remember one of my mentors, one time I was a young head coach, and when you're a first-year leader, as we all know, first-year job, being a head coach, there's so many things you just don't know. You just don't know. And I would call my mentor up almost daily. And finally one day he said something to me because I was giving him all the problems and challenges I was having. And he says, Donnie, you're the pilot. You got to land the plane. And I thought that was such great advice. You're going to have challenges as a leader. You're just going to. You got to figure it out. Yep. And you might have to ask some other people some questions, but you got to land the plane, bottom line.
Yep, that's exactly right. Well, I love that thought that because I think a lot of pastors may need to hear that you may not be the best preacher, since whoever, Jesus or Paul or Billy Graham or whoever you think's a great preacher, but you might be the right preacher for that job. You might not be the best pastor, if you were having a lineup of, okay, so somebody else could do this better or that better, but I'm the right pastor for this church at this time for these people to care for them. And I just think, I love that. It's not about, are you whatever the best would be, it's, I'm the right one for here and now. And I think people need to, feel that and know that. I'm the right person for this place and these people.
I agree, and I just always felt like I've been so blessed at every job that I've taken, that I've had, number one, really good players to coach. And I was a really smart coach when I had good players.
Amazing how that works.
And two is I had great administrative support. So I think when you're a leader, I think too, when you're a head coach or a leader, you need somebody that you can talk to, that you really trust, who tells you what you need to hear, maybe not always what you want to hear.
Yeah, that's good. You said something that is sort of one of those Ted Lasso-esque kind of things to say. You talked about it's not where you start. Why don't you share that quote?
Well, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And I think you always have to begin with the end in mind. Right now, like what I love about coaching a team is you take this team and a group of 18, 20 kids, and you take each one of them and get each one of them better so that the collective good is better. And I love that. I miss that. Being a head coach, taking a team and doing that, you couldn't pay me all the money in the world. I love that. Yeah. I miss that.
So I want to end by asking you, you had a state championship team at Shawnee Mission West.
No, it was at Blue Valley West.
Blue Valley West. Okay, so and you were a 6A. I mean, you're top of the heap, state champion basketball team. What's it take to create a state championship team? What was different that year, or clearly you have talent, but in your kids. But so how do you do that? How do you create a state championship team?
Well, I think you got to be a little lucky. I think there were some years that we had some better teams when we could have won it, but we just weren't that lucky. And getting kids to play together and embrace their role. Because sometimes, kids think that their role is this or their role is this, where you've got to be very definitive on what their role is. And then to work with them and to understand the value of their role. To let them know, hey, maybe you're not a scorer, but you can be a screener. You can be a defender. I want you to guard their best player and to embrace that role because the best teams that I coached that were state championship teams, and I had some other teams that were better than those, but they just played well together. They played hard. They were coachable. They were good teammates. It's been, 2007 is the last time that I coached a state championship team. We were state runner-up in 2012. And then at Shawnee Mission West, we were runner-up, I think, in 92. But all those teams had all those qualities. But I think, again, the state championship looks great on your resume. You know what I mean? But I can take some teams that maybe weren't state championship, and I felt like I got the most out of them I could get. Yeah. That means just as much to me as the state championship.
Yeah. So I want to end with this. You and I were talking about this the other day. So you're coaching this kid named Jason Sudeikis. The fact that you remember him, it's surprising to me that any of my teachers would ever remember me 30 years later. But you remember him, and you poured into him like you did all these other kids. You would have no idea that what you were doing at that time was going to impact in a positive. The show's heartwarming. It touches people's hearts. It inspires them, and you helped shape that. And now there are millions and millions of people who find their hearts, touched by this character patterned after you, and it just sort of again reminds me how we don't know along the way how what we're doing is going to have an impact on the whole. And sometimes we can't see it until we get to heaven. I remember a pastor once said, I anticipate when I get to heaven, hoping to see a long line of people who will say, my life was changed by being a part of this particular church, and in your case, you're having a chance to witness that. What's that feel like to you? Is it,
it's humbling. It's a great feeling that you made. I've always said this, a lot of times you don't understand what impact you made on kids until you retire or you die. Of course, you don't know when you die. You go to heaven, then you find out, right? But I'm just very, very happy for Jason. But most importantly, just watching Jason and talking to the group of kids that I coached at Shawnee Mission West with him, there's 4 or 5 of them, they still are best friends with Jason. I mean, they still text each other, talk to each other, and that was a fun group to coach. And but to have that impact on him and to know that I had a part in the show that people love, it's an awesome feeling. It really is for me. I'm very, very proud.
That's terrific. Well, you should be. You should be. Coach, I really want to thank you for taking the time to meet with me today, and I'm grateful for your life and your faith.
Thank you. And again, I love it. I'm enjoying this time. It's probably here for long. It's not going to happen anymore. I'm not going to be able to get any interviews. Probably the only interview I'm going to get is for my grandson wanting to go get an ice cream cone or something.
That's great. All right, I want to say to all of you joining us for Vespers, thank you so much for joining tonight. I hope that you enjoyed this. And if you've not watched Ted Lasso, now I got to warn you, there's some language in Ted Lasso, especially season 2. It seems like it gets a little worse. Some salty language, and you gotta be able to set aside that language and just go, okay, what's the story? This is, the television show's for real people. It wasn't made for church people to, make sure it's got a G rating. It's made for, a largely secular audience, and yet touching their hearts. And so anyway, you might check it out. It's on Apple TV. I think you'll enjoy it. And I'd like to just end with prayer if you bow with me. God, I thank you for every person who's joined us today on Vespers. I pray that you would bless them. Help us to learn some lessons from Coach Donnie, the things that he's taught us today. And help us to be the kind of people that pour into other people who know our why, our purpose in life, people who long to help other people around us be better human beings, and help us to have a sense of mission and purpose as we seek to follow you, Jesus. Bless Coach Donnie and watch over him, we pray. We ask this in Christ's name.